My name is Sarah. I am 28 years old, and on paper, I am just a struggling freelance artist scraping by in New York City. For the last 3 years, I have played the role of the devoted, unassuming wife perfectly. I cooked the meals, I cleaned the penthouse, and I kept my head down while my husband Liam acted the part of the wealthy, successful businessman. My mother-in-law, Victoria, never missed a chance to remind me that I was nothing more than a lucky charity case she had allowed into her prestigious family. She treated me like a stain on her designer silk rug. But what Victoria did not know was that the rug, the penthouse, and the very foundation of her social status were not paid for by her son. They were paid for by me. My husband passed away suddenly when I was 4 months pregnant. My mother-in-law ordered me to get rid of the baby and threw me onto the street. She tossed a thick envelope of cash onto the doctor's desk and hissed that I needed to fix this mistake immediately. She looked at me with pure disgust and told me that her family line would not continue through a nobody like me. But the doctor, after examining me, looked at my file and then at me with wide eyes. He ignored her money and told me, "Do not give up on the baby. Come with me." He saw that the name on my medical file was not just a patient name, it was the name on the hospital building. They thought I was a penniless gold digger. They did not know I owned the very ground they stood on. Before we see how a cruel mother-in-law pays the ultimate price, hit that subscribe button if you believe karma always collects its debt. 3 days earlier, the nightmare began. The air inside the St. Jude funeral home was thick with the scent of lilies and expensive perfume. It was a suffocating atmosphere of forced grief and old money. I stood near the entrance wearing a simple black dress holding my stomach where my 4-month-old baby grew. My legs were trembling not from fear, but from the sheer exhaustion of grieving the man I loved while navigating the sharks he called family. I tried to step toward the front row, toward the mahogany casket where Liam lay. That was where the widow was supposed to sit. That was my place. But before I could take 2 steps, a hand with long manicured nails gripped my arm. It was Victoria. Her face was hidden behind a black lace veil, but I could feel the coldness of her stare. She did not look like a grieving mother. She looked like a stage director, ensuring her play went exactly according to script. "You are not sitting there, Sarah," Victoria whispered, her voice low and venomous. I looked at her confused. "I am his wife, Victoria. That is my seat." "Not today," she hissed, digging her nails into my skin. "Look around you. We have senators here. We have partners from the firm. Do you really think I want them to see you sitting there looking like you just crawled out of a basement? You are an embarrassment, Sarah. You always have been. Liam is gone now, so I do not have to pretend to tolerate you anymore." She signaled to one of the ushers, a man who looked terrified of her. "Put her in the back row by the door. If she makes a sound, escort her out." My heart hammered against my ribs. I watched as the usher guided me to a folding chair set up in the shadow of the exit sign. It was the seat reserved for distant acquaintances or staff, not the wife of the deceased. But the true humiliation came moments later. The heavy oak doors opened and in walked Vanessa. She was the daughter of Liam's biggest business rival, a woman. Victoria had always wanted Liam to marry. Vanessa was draped in couture black silk, sobbing theatrically into a handkerchief. Victoria rushed forward, embracing Vanessa as if she were the grieving widow. She guided Vanessa to the front row, placing her in the seat that belonged to me. I watched as Vanessa placed a hand on Liam's casket, receiving sympathetic nods from the crowd. The room whispered. I could hear them. Poor Vanessa. They were such a perfect match. Who is that girl in the back? Probably just the help or a distant cousin. I sat alone in the back, gripping the hem of my dress until my knuckles turned white. My first instinct was to scream, to march up there and demand my place, but I stopped myself. I took a deep breath. I looked around the room at the crown molding the marble floors and the velvet drapes. I knew the cost of every item in this room because I owned the parent company of this funeral home chain. I had approved the renovation budget for this very location 6 months ago. Let them have their theater, I thought. Let Victoria play her games. She was staging a performance on a stage I had paid for. After the service, the guests moved to the reception hall. I tried to call my lawyer to initiate the asset freeze protocols I had prepared, but I could not find my phone. I checked my purse. It was gone. My wallet was gone too. Panic began to rise. I turned around and saw Victoria standing there holding my clutch bag. She was smiling a tight, predatory smile. Looking for this, she asked, dangling my bag by the strap. "Give it back, Victoria," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I do not think so," she replied, opening the bag and pulling out my phone. She dropped the phone into her own purse. "You are clearly hysterical, Sarah. Grief has made you unstable. I am doing this for your own good. You do not need to be bothering people with your nonsense right now. I will keep your finances and your communications safe until you are mentally fit," which we both know might never happen. She snapped her fingers and 2 large security guards stepped up behind her. "Escort her to the car," she commanded them. "Take her back to the estate and lock her in the guest room. We cannot have her causing a scene here." I looked at the guards, then at Victoria. Beside her stood Jasmine, my sister-in-law. Jasmine was the only person in this family with a spine. She was a brilliant lawyer, a black woman who had fought her way into this white elitist family by marrying Liam's younger brother Connor. Jasmine's eyes met mine. She saw the theft. She saw the abuse. She did not say a word, but she gave me a barely perceptible nod. It was a signal. Wait. I allowed the guards to lead me away. I did not fight. I did not cry. I walked out of my own husband's funeral with my head high, knowing that every sin Victoria committed today was being tallied. The drive back to the estate was silent. The rain had started to fall, a cold gray downpour that matched the bleakness of my future in this house. When we arrived, the guards deposited me in the foyer of the sprawling colonial mansion. This was the house Liam and I had been staying in while our own home was being renovated. It was a place I hated. It smelled of old wax and judgment. I waited for hours. Night fell. The rain intensified, battering against the windows. Finally, the front door opened. Victoria swept in, followed by Vanessa and a man I recognized as the family's shady personal attorney. They were laughing. They were actually laughing on the day of Liam's funeral. Victoria stopped when she saw me standing in the hallway. The laughter died on her lips, replaced by a look of sheer annoyance. "Why are you still here?" she asked, pulling off her leather gloves. "I live here, Victoria," I said. "This is my home." She laughed, a harsh barking sound that echoed off the high ceilings. "Home. This was never your home. You were a guest who has overstayed her welcome." The attorney stepped forward, pulling a document from his briefcase. He did not look me in the eye. "Mrs. Vance," he mumbled, "I am afraid the situation is quite complex. It appears Liam left behind significant debts. He owed his mother's estate upwards of $5 million. "That is a lie," I said, my voice cutting through the air. "Liam did not have debts." "He did according to this," Victoria interrupted, snatching the paper. "And since you are his wife, you are liable. But because I am a generous woman, I am willing to offer you a deal." She walked closer to me, her heels clicking on the marble floor. She looked me up and down, her eyes stopping on my stomach. "You are young, Sarah. You are somewhat attractive in a common sort of way. You can start over, but not with that baggage." She pointed a long, bony finger at my unborn child. "That thing inside you," she said, her voice dripping with disgust. "It is a burden. I will not have my son's legacy tainted by a child raised by someone of your background. We do not know what kind of genetics you carry. We do not want a mongrel grandchild." The word hung in the air. Mongrel. It was a slur, a weapon designed to strip me of my humanity. My blood ran cold, but my mind sharpened. This was it. This was the line. "Here is the offer," Victoria continued, oblivious to the shift in my demeanor. "You go to the clinic tomorrow. You get rid of it. I will pay for the procedure and I will give you $10,000 to leave the state. You will never contact us again." And if I refuse, I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Victoria smiled. It was the smile of a predator who thought the trap had already snapped shut. "Then you leave tonight. With nothing. The clothes on your back are technically mine since Liam bought them with my money, but I will let you keep them. Consider it a parting gift. But you get out, now." She gestured to the door. Outside, the storm was raging. I looked at Jasmine, who had just entered the room with Connor. Jasmine looked horrified. She stepped forward to speak, but I caught her eye again. I shook my head slightly. "Not yet." I looked back at Victoria. I looked at the fake legal papers in her hand. I looked at Vanessa, who was smirking in the background. I reached for the coat rack and grabbed my trench coat. I buttoned it slowly, my movements deliberate and calm. "You are making a mistake, Victoria," I said softly. "Is that a threat?" She laughed. "Look at you. You have no money, no phone, no family. You are nothing. Now get out of my house before I call the police and have you arrested for trespassing." I walked to the heavy oak door. I opened it and the wind howled, blowing rain into the foyer, soaking the expensive rug. I turned back one last time. "Remember this moment, Victoria," I said, my voice carrying over the sound of the storm. "Remember exactly how it felt to kick your son's widow and unborn child out into the rain. Because when the wheel turns, and it always turns, you will look back on this night and realize it was the moment you lost everything." I stepped out into the darkness and closed the door behind me. The sound of the latch clicking shut was final. I was alone in the rain, pregnant and penniless, or so they thought. As I walked down the long driveway, the cold water soaking through my clothes, I did not feel fear. I felt a cold, hard clarity. They had taken my grief and turned it into a war, and they had no idea they had just declared war on a general. I walked toward the main road, my hand resting on my stomach, protecting the future heir of the Aurora Empire. The game had just begun. The rain had soaked through my thin coat, chilling me to the bone, but the sharp cramping in my lower abdomen terrified me far more than the cold. I stumbled through the glass doors of the Aurora private clinic, my hand instinctively protective over my stomach. The sterile scent of antiseptic and lilies hit me, a familiar smell that usually brought me comfort. After all, I had approved that specific scent profile for all our locations during a board meeting last year. But today, I was not walking in as the majority shareholder and founder. I was walking in as a patient who looked like a drowned rat, shivering and penniless. I approached the front desk, my teeth chattering. The receptionist, a young woman named Clara, whom I had hired 2 months ago, but who had never seen my face, looked up with concern. "I need to see a doctor," I whispered, gripping the edge of the marble counter to steady myself. "Please, it is an emergency." Clara moved quickly. "Of course, let me get your information. Do you have insurance?" Before I could answer, the automatic doors behind me slid open with a violent whoosh. The sound of expensive high heels striking the tile floor echoed through the quiet waiting room like gunshots. I did not need to turn around to know who it was. My mother-in-law had tracked me down. Victoria never left a job unfinished, and she considered my complete destruction her current project. "There she is!" Victoria shrieked, pointing a gloved finger at me. Her voice shattered the peaceful atmosphere, causing patients in the waiting area to jump in their seats. I closed my eyes for a second, summoning every ounce of strength I had left. I turned slowly. Victoria stood there looking impeccable in her dry designer trench coat, flanked by her personal driver. She looked like a queen descending into the slums, although this was one of the most expensive clinics in the city. "You thought you could run away and rack up medical bills on my family name?" she shouted, marching toward me. She stopped inches from my face, the smell of her cloying perfume making me nauseous. "I am not using your name, Victoria," I said, my voice low and steady, despite the pain in my stomach. "I am checking in under my own name." "Your name is worth nothing," she spat. "You have no job. You have no assets. You are a leech, Sarah, a parasite attached to my son, and now that he is gone, you are trying to attach yourself to my bank account." She turned to the receptionist, who looked terrified. "Listen to me clearly, young lady. This woman has no means to pay you. She is destitute. If you treat her, you will never see a dime." Clara looked from Victoria to me, her eyes wide. "Ma'am, we have a duty of care to all patients, regardless of payment status in an emergency." Victoria let out a harsh laugh. "Oh, save the bleeding heart speech. This is the real world. Nothing is free." Victoria reached into her purse and pulled out a platinum American Express card. It gleamed under the clinic lights, a symbol of the power she thought she wielded. She slammed it onto the marble counter with a loud crack. The sound made everyone in the room flinch. "I will pay," she announced loudly, making sure every person in the waiting room could hear her generosity. "I will cover every single expense for her treatment today. I will pay for the best doctors, the best medicine, everything." I looked at her wary. Victoria never gave anything without taking something twice as valuable in return. "What is the catch, Victoria?" I asked. Victoria smiled, that same predatory smile she had worn at the funeral. She leaned in close, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was still loud enough to carry. "I pay, but only for one specific procedure. You tell the doctor to get rid of it." The room went deathly silent. I felt the blood drain from my face. "You want me to abort my child?" I asked, my voice trembling with rage. I want you to remove the burden, she corrected smoothly. You get rid of that mistake inside you and I will pay your medical bills. I will even give you a little extra to get a bus ticket out of town. But if you keep it, you are on your own. No money, no doctor. Just you and a fatherless brat starving on the street. So what is it going to be, Sarah? The procedure or the pavement? She tapped the platinum card on the counter. Click, click, click. The sound was maddening. It is a generous offer, she told the receptionist. You should tell her to take it. She cannot afford an aspirin on her own. I stared at the card. It was limitless, or so she thought, but I knew the credit limit on that specific account because my financial team monitored the debt-to-income ratio of all our borrowers, and Victoria was technically a high-risk borrower. She was flashing a card that was nearly maxed out trying to buy the life of my unborn child. I took a deep breath. The pain in my stomach flared again, but my mind was crystal clear. Keep your money, Victoria, I said. I do not need it. She scoffed. Do not be an idiot. You have nothing. You are a nobody. You are a little painter who thinks she can survive in the big city without a sponsor. You need me. Suddenly, the double doors leading to the medical suites swung open. A tall man with graying hair and an air of absolute authority stepped out. It was Dr. Sterling, the chief of medicine and the director of this facility. He was wearing his white coat, his stethoscope around his neck, and he looked furious at the disturbance. What is going on out here? Dr. Sterling demanded, his voice booming. This is a place of healing, not a marketplace. Victoria immediately straightened her posture, putting on her charming socialite mask. Oh, doctor, thank goodness. I am Victoria Vance. I am just trying to help this poor deluded girl. She is having a medical crisis and has no way to pay. I was simply offering to cover the costs provided she makes the sensible medical decision to terminate the pregnancy. She pushed the platinum card toward Dr. Sterling. Here, put whatever she needs on this, as long as the outcome is what I asked for. Dr. Sterling looked at the card. Then he looked at Victoria with an expression of cold disdain. He did not touch the card. He did not even acknowledge it. Instead, he turned his eyes to me. His expression softened instantly, transforming from anger to deep respect. He walked past Victoria as if she were a piece of furniture. He stopped in front of me and bowed his head slightly, a gesture of deference that shocked the entire room. Madam Chairman, he said, his voice clear and respectful. We have been waiting for your orders. I saw you on the security feed and came immediately. The silence that followed was absolute. Victoria, blinking rapidly, looked as if she had been slapped. Excuse me. She laughed nervously, a high-pitched sound. Doctor, I think you are confused. You called her chairman. This is Sarah. She is my late son's wife. She is unemployed. She is just a freelance artist. She gestured at me dismissively. She paints landscapes for pocket change. She is not a chairman of anything. Dr. Sterling turned slowly to face Victoria. His eyes were like ice. Mrs. Vance, I assure you I am not confused. And Sarah is not just a painter. She is the founder and majority shareholder of Aurora Medical Systems. She owns this building. She owns the equipment. She owns the very chair you are standing next to. Victoria's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked at me, then at the doctor, then back at me. Her brain was trying to process information that contradicted everything she believed about her world. That is impossible, she stammered. She cooks dinner. She cleans the house. She let me yell at her for buying the wrong brand of coffee. I stepped forward, my pain momentarily forgotten in the heat of the moment. I looked Victoria dead in the eye. I cooked dinner because I wanted to take care of my husband, I said, my voice eerily calm. I cleaned the house because I liked things tidy, and I let you yell at me because I valued Liam's peace of mind more than I valued correcting your ignorance. But Liam is gone now, Victoria, and I am done being quiet. Victoria stared at me, her face draining of color. She looked at the platinum card still sitting on the counter. Suddenly, it looked very small and very insignificant. Dr. Sterling gestured to the nurses. Prepare the presidential suite immediately. The chairman needs a full obstetrics workup. And call security. Security, Victoria squeaked. Yes, Dr. Sterling said, adjusting his glasses. We have a strict policy against harassment of our staff and patients, and especially against harassment of our ownership. Please escort this woman off the premises. As two security guards stepped forward, Victoria took a stumbling step back. Her eyes were wide with panic and confusion. She looked at me one last time, not with hatred, but with fear. "Sarah, wait," she whispered. "You own all of this." I did not answer. I simply turned my back on her and walked through the medical doors, Dr. Sterling holding them open for me. Behind me, I heard the satisfying sound of Victoria protesting as she was firmly escorted out into the rain. "Let go of me. Do you know who I am?" she screamed. "Yes, Victoria," I thought as the doors slid shut, cutting off her voice. "We all know who you are. You are the woman who just declared war on the landlord." For the next 30 days, I watched the slow, systematic dismantling of Victoria Vance from the comfort of my penthouse living room. 30 floors above the city, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling glass and modern art that cost more than Victoria's entire jewelry collection, I sipped herbal tea and monitored the decline of the Vance dynasty. It was a spectacle of tragic irony. Victoria had spent her entire life believing that money was a birthright, something that flowed endlessly from the family name. She never understood that the river of cash she bathed in had been fed by her son's salary, which in turn was funded by my company. When Liam died, the salary stopped. When I left the secret subsidies I had been funneling into the estate maintenance account stopped too. Living in the shadows was comfortable. My pregnancy was progressing beautifully, and Dr. Sterling ensured I had the best care available, coming directly to the penthouse for checkups to avoid any more public scenes. But while my body rested, my mind was working overtime. I had instructed my financial team to execute what we called Operation Eclipse. We did not just stop paying the bills, we aggressively acquired them. Every time Victoria missed a payment on the estate mortgage, my shell company Aurora Trust bought the debt. When she defaulted on her credit lines, Aurora Trust bought those too. Slowly, quietly, I was becoming the owner of everything she thought was hers. Victoria was bleeding money. I knew she had sold the vacation home in the Hamptons at a loss just to keep up appearances at the country club. I knew she had pawned her diamond tennis bracelet to pay the catering staff for a luncheon she could not afford to host. But her pride was a bottomless pit, and she would rather starve than admit she was broke. Then came the desperation move. My intelligence network, which consisted of a very loyal forensic accountant and the security system I had installed in the Vance estate years ago, alerted me to her plan. Victoria was organizing a Hail Mary pass. She was hosting an exclusive investment dinner at the family estate. She had heard rumors of a mysterious angel investor, a representative from the very fund that was buying up local debt Aurora Trust. She believed that if she could charm this investor, she could secure a massive loan or perhaps a partnership that would save her sinking ship. She did not realize that the angel investor she was so desperate to woo was the same woman she had thrown out into the rain. I watched the security feed from the library in the Vance estate. The room was chaotic, piles of overdue notices swept off the desk to make room for flower arrangements. Victoria was pacing back and forth, barking orders at the few staff members she had not yet fired. Jasmine, my sister-in-law, sat on the leather sofa reviewing documents. Her face was tight with worry. Jasmine was the only one with enough brain cells to realize that the math was not adding up. "Mothers, we need to talk," Jasmine said, her voice calm but firm. "I have been looking at the paperwork for these debt acquisitions. This Aurora Trust. They are moving too fast. They are not just a bank. They are a predator. They have bought the mortgage, the car loans, and even the outstanding balance on the club membership. This is a hostile takeover strategy." Victoria waved her hand dismissively, pouring herself a glass of wine at 2 p.m. "Do not be dramatic, Jasmine. You always see shadows where there is only sunshine. This Aurora Trust is clearly interested in the Vance legacy. They want to invest in our prestige. Once I get their representative to this dinner and show them the true value of our social standing, they will be begging to refinance us." Jasmine stood up, smoothing her skirt. "That is not how finance works, Victoria. They now own 80% of your debt. If you miss one more payment, they can foreclose on this house immediately. I think you should sell the estate voluntarily while you still can downsize and pay them off. Do not sign anything with them tonight. I have a bad feeling about this." Victoria spun around, her face twisting into a snarl. "Sell the estate? Are you out of your mind? This house has been in the family for 4 generations. But of course you would not understand that. You come from people who rent apartments, not people who own history. I watched the screen, my hands clenching into fists. Victoria's racism was always simmering just beneath the surface, waiting for stress to boil it over. Jasmine stiffened. I am giving you legal advice as a top attorney in this city, not as your daughter-in-law. And my advice is that you are walking into a trap. Victoria laughed a cruel sound. You are a second-rate lawyer, Jasmine. Liam only hired you to handle the small stuff because he felt sorry for Connor. Do not pretend you understand high finance. Just make sure the contracts are ready for the investor tonight. And try to dress appropriately. We want to look like old money, not like we are struggling. Jasmine picked up her briefcase. Her eyes were cold. I will have the contracts ready, Victoria. But when this house of cards falls, do not say I did not warn you. As Jasmine walked out, I picked up my phone. It was time to bait the hook. I called my assistant Marcus, who was acting as the public face of Aurora Trust. Make the call, Marcus, I said. Tell her the representative accepts the invitation to the dinner. But give her the condition. 2 minutes later, I watched on the screen as Victoria's phone rang. She answered it, putting on her most syrupy fake voice. Aurora Trust. Oh, wonderful. We are so delighted that your representative can make it. We have prepared a magnificent evening. I could hear Marcus's voice on the other end, crisp and professional. Mrs. Vance, the chairman, is looking forward to potential partnership. However, Aurora Trust prides itself on family values and community charity. In our background check, we noted a recent tragedy in your family involving a widowed daughter-in-law. Victoria froze. Her eyes darted around the empty room. Oh, yes. Sarah, a terrible tragedy. She is struggling with her grief, Marcus continued. The chairman insists on a display of family unity. We would like to see that the family takes care of its own. We require that Mrs. Sarah Vance be present at the dinner tonight. It would reassure us that the Vance family honors its obligations. Without her presence, the chairman feels this partnership would not align with our moral standards. Victoria's face turned a shade of purple I had never seen before. She looked like she was choking. Invite Sarah, but she is indisposed. She is very fragile right now. Then perhaps we should reschedule for next year, Marcus said, his tone suggesting he was about to hang up. No, Victoria shouted into the phone. No, that is not necessary. I will reach out to her. I am sure she would love to join us. We are a very close family after all. Excellent, Marcus said. The representative will arrive at 8 o'clock. We look forward to it. The call ended. Victoria screamed a primal sound of rage and hurled her wine glass into the fireplace, shattering it against the bricks. I hate her, she shrieked at the empty room. Even from the gutter, she ruins everything. She paced for a moment, muttering to herself, Fine, I will invite the little rat. I will sit her at the kids' table. I will make her look like a charity case. I will show this investor that we are saints for tolerating her. Yes, this can work. I will use her as a prop. I waited. 10 minutes later, my burner phone rang. It was the cheap prepaid phone I had kept specifically for this moment. I let it ring 3 times before answering, making my voice sound weak and hesitant. Hello? Sarah, it is Victoria. The voice was unrecognizable from the screeching harpy I had just watched. It was warm, dripping with synthetic honey. Oh, hello, Victoria. Listen, darling, I have been thinking about you. We all have. I feel terrible about how things were left at the funeral. Grief makes us all do crazy things, doesn't it? I want to make it right. I smiled at the city skyline, my reflection in the glass looking sharper, stronger than she could ever imagine. You do? I asked, playing the part. Yes. We are having a small, intimate dinner tonight, just family and a few close friends. I want you to come. I want you to come home, Sarah. We can talk about the baby. We can talk about your future. I want to help you. The lie was so thick I could almost taste it. She did not want to help me. She wanted to parade me in front of a billionaire to prove she was a good person so she could get money to maintain a lifestyle she did not earn. I do not know, Victoria, I said, letting a tremble enter my voice. I do not have anything to wear. It has been hard. Oh, you poor thing, Victoria purred. Do not worry about that. Just come as you are. It shows humility. It shows how much you need us. Just be here by 7. Do this for Liam. For Liam, she always used him as a weapon. "Okay, Victoria," I whispered. "I will be there." "Good girl. See you at 7. She hung up. On the security monitor, I saw her smirk. She turned to the mirror, smoothing her hair. "Perfect," she said to herself. "She will look like a disaster. The investor will see that I am a saint for taking in a stray dog." I set the phone down on my marble coffee table. I stood up and walked to my dressing room. It was vast, filled with rows of designer clothes that Victoria would kill for. But tonight, I would not wear them. I went to the back of the closet and pulled out a simple, faded maternity dress. It was clean but worn. It looked like something bought from a thrift store. I pulled my hair back into a messy bun. I applied makeup to make myself look paler, more tired. I wanted to look exactly like the victim she wanted me to be. But underneath the dress, I put on a set of diamond earrings that were small but worth more than her car. And in my purse, I placed the final transfer deeds for the estate. I was going to give her exactly what she asked for. I was going to be the prop in her play. But she forgot one thing about props. Sometimes if you are not careful, they can bring the whole set crashing down on your head. As I took the elevator down to the garage, where my driver was waiting in a nondescript sedan, instead of my usual limousine, I felt a surge of adrenaline. This was not just revenge. This was an exorcism. I was going back to that house to clear out the ghosts and the rats. The drive to the estate took 40 minutes. As we approached the iron gates, memories flooded back. The times she made me enter through the service entrance. The times she criticized my cooking in front of guests. The way she looked at me when I told her I was pregnant with the first heir to her dynasty. We pulled up the long driveway. The house was lit up like a Christmas tree. Expensive cars lined the front drive. She had gone all out. She was trying to dazzle the Aurora representative. I got out of the car. The air was crisp. I walked up the front steps, the same steps I had descended in the rain a month ago. The door opened before I could knock. It was the butler, an old man named Henry, who had always been kind to me when Victoria wasn't looking. He looked at me with sad eyes. "Mrs. Vance," he whispered, "I am so sorry. She is in a mood tonight. Please be careful." "Thank you, Henry," I said softly. "Do not worry about me." I stepped into the foyer. The sound of clinking glasses and laughter drifted from the main salon. I took a deep breath. It was time. Victoria appeared almost instantly, as if she had been waiting to ambush me. She was wearing a red velvet gown that was too tight and too young for her. She was draped in jewelry that I knew was insured by a policy she had stopped paying on 3 months ago. "Sarah," she announced, her voice booming so everyone could hear. "You made it!" She rushed forward, grabbing my shoulders. Her grip was hard, painful. She pulled me into the light. "Look, everyone! Look who I managed to bring in from the cold!" The guests turned. I recognized most of them, social climbers, sycophants, people who owed Victoria money or favors. And in the corner, Jasmine holding a glass of water, looking at me with a mixture of confusion and fear. She shook her head slightly, warning me to run, but I did not run. I let Victoria guide me into the room. "You look well tired, dear," Victoria said loudly. "But that is to be expected. Living without support must be so draining. But do not worry. You are safe here tonight." She leaned in close to my ear, her breath smelling of expensive champagne and desperation. "Do not speak unless spoken to," she hissed. "And try not to eat like a starving animal. The investor will be here any minute. If you ruin this, I will make sure you never see the light of day again." I looked at her with wide, innocent eyes. "I understand, Victoria. Thank you for inviting me." She patted my cheek, a condescending slap disguised as affection. "Good. Now go stand over there by the kitchen door. You can help the servers with the appetizers until the VIP arrives. It will give you something to do with your hands." I walked to the corner she pointed to. I took a tray of hors d'oeuvres from a passing waiter. I stood there holding the tray, blending into the background, a servant in my own house. A few minutes later, the grandfather clock in the hall chimed 8 times. The room went silent. Victoria smoothed her dress and took a deep breath. She walked to the center of the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, "the moment we have been waiting for. Please welcome the representative from Aurora Trust." The double doors opened. My assistant Marcus walked in. He was young, sharp, and dressed in a suit that cost more than the annual salary of everyone in the room combined. But he was alone. Victoria looked behind him, expecting someone else. A confused look crossed her face. "Mr. Marcus, is it?" she asked. "Where's the chairman? You said the chairman would be joining us." Marcus stopped in the middle of the room. He looked at Victoria, then he looked at the guests. Finally, his eyes found me, standing in the corner holding the tray of appetizers. He smiled, a cold, professional smile. "The chairman is already here, Mrs. Vance," he said. Victoria laughed nervously, looking around the room. "I do not understand. There is no one else here, just us and—" She stopped. She followed Marcus's gaze. It led directly to the corner, to the woman in the faded maternity dress holding a tray of crab cakes. Silence descended on the room. It was heavy, suffocating. Marcus walked past Victoria. He walked past the shocked guests. He walked straight to me. He stopped in front of me and took the tray from my hands, setting it down on a nearby table. Then he bowed. "Good evening, Madam Chairman," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "The transfer is complete. The estate is yours." I rolled my shoulders back, dropping the slump I had faked. I lifted my chin. The shy, beaten widow evaporated. In her place stood the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar empire. "Thank you, Marcus," I said, my voice changing from the whispery tremble to my natural commanding tone. "You are late." Victoria let out a sound that was half gasp, half choke. What is happening?" she stammered. "Sarah, what is he doing? Why is he calling you that?" I stepped forward into the center of the room. The crowd parted for me like the Red Sea. I walked up to Victoria until I was towering over her. "He is calling me that, Victoria, because that is my title. I am the founder and majority shareholder of Aurora Trust, the company that owns your mortgage, your car, your jewelry, and as of 5 minutes ago, this house." Victoria stumbled back, grabbing a chair for support. No, that is a lie. You are a painter. You are nobody. Liam gave you money." I laughed. It was a genuine laugh this time. "Liam was on my payroll, Victoria. Every dollar he gave you to support your delusions of grandeur came from my accounts. I let him pretend to be the big man because I loved him, and I let you pretend to be the matriarch because I respected him." I pulled the folded deed from my purse and tossed it onto the table next to the appetizers. "But you broke the contract, Victoria. The moment you threw his child out into the rain, you voided the terms of my generosity." Jasmine stepped forward, looking at the papers. She flipped through them, her eyes scanning the legal jargon rapidly. She looked up at me, a slow smile spreading across her face. "It is ironclad," she announced to the room. "The deed is transferred in lieu of foreclosure. Sarah owns the property free and clear. Victoria, you are technically trespassing." The guests began to whisper. Some were already edging toward the door, sensing the blood in the water. Victoria looked around wildly. "No, this is a trick. You cannot do this to me. I am Victoria Vance. This is my home. You are just a mother," I interrupted, cutting her off. "A mother who will do anything to protect her child, even if it means buying the roof over your head just to kick you out from under it." I turned to the guests. "The dinner is over," I announced. "Please clear the room. My security team is waiting outside to secure the premises." As the guests scrambled to leave, I looked at Victoria one last time. She looked small, old, and pathetic. "You wanted to show, Victoria," I said softly. "You wanted to show the investor how generous you are. Well, the investor has seen enough. Get out." The heavy oak doors of the Vance estate swung open, and the sound of a string quartet spilled out into the cool night air. I stepped across the threshold, and for a moment, the music seemed to falter. The conversation in the grand ballroom dipped in volume as heads turned. I knew exactly what they were seeing. They saw a pregnant widow in a faded floral dress that had seen better days. Her hair pulled back in a simple, messy bun, looking small and out of place amidst the sea of tuxedos and designer evening gowns. To them, I was a stain on a perfect picture. To me, they were actors on a stage I had already bought and paid for. I walked further into the room, clutching my worn handbag with both hands, feigning a posture of insecurity. I kept my eyes lowered, letting my shoulders slump slightly. It was a performance I had rehearsed in the mirror for the last hour. I needed to look defeated. I needed to look like the charity case Victoria had described to everyone in this room. The air smelled of expensive perfume and roasted duck, but underneath it all I could smell the rot of desperation. This party was Victoria's last stand, a frantic attempt to glitter her way out of bankruptcy. Victoria spotted me almost immediately. She was holding court near the ice sculpture, a glass of champagne in one hand, and a diamond bracelet on her wrist that I knew she had attempted to insure twice. Her eyes widened when she saw my dress. For a split second, I saw pure, unadulterated rage flash across her face. She was angry that I hadn't even tried to look presentable. But then, just as quickly, the mask slipped back into place. She realized that my shabby appearance served her narrative perfectly. She set her glass down and glided toward me, her red velvet gown swishing against the marble floor. She opened her arms wide, her voice projecting to the back of the room. "Sarah, darling, you actually came." She embraced me, but there was no warmth in it. Her body was rigid and her fingers dug into my shoulders like talons. She pulled back slightly, looking me up and down with a pitying smile that was designed to humiliate. "Oh, you poor dear," she said loud enough for the senator standing nearby to hear. "I told you that you could have borrowed one of my old dresses. You did not have to wear, well, whatever this is. But I suppose it is brave of you to show your face regardless of your situation." I kept my voice small and trembling. "Thank you for inviting me, Victoria. I did not know it would be so formal." Victoria laughed, a light tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. "Oh, Sarah, you never did understand the finer points of society, did you? But that is all right. You are here now, and that is what matters. Come, let me introduce you. There are so many people who have been dying to meet the girl Liam settled for." She clamped her hand around my upper arm and began to steer me through the crowd like a prize show pony, or rather like a rescue dog she had adopted to prove her own benevolence. We stopped first at a circle of women I recognized from the country club. They were the type of women who spent more on their poodle's grooming than most families spent on groceries. They looked at me with open disdain, their eyes flicking to my stomach and then to my scuffed shoes. "Ladies, you remember Sarah, don't you?" Victoria said, positioning me in the center of the circle. "Liam's widow. It has been so hard for her since the accident. Without Liam's income, she has been struggling terribly." Mrs. Higgins, a woman with hair sprayed into a concrete helmet, leaned forward. "Oh yes, the artist, right. Are you still painting, dear?" I opened my mouth to speak, but Victoria cut me off. "Oh, heavens no." Victoria sighed. "Painting is a hobby, Mrs. Higgins, not a career. Sarah is currently, well, she is between opportunities. We are trying to help her navigate the welfare system. It is so complex, isn't it? But we cannot have Liam's child growing up on the street, can we? So I told her, Sarah, you come here tonight and we will make sure you get a hot meal." The women murmured in sympathetic tones, but their eyes were cold. "So generous of you, Victoria," Mrs. Higgins said. "Most families would have washed their hands of the situation, especially considering, well, you know, the background differences." I stood there letting the insults wash over me. They spoke about me as if I were not in the room, as if I were a piece of furniture that had been brought in to demonstrate Victoria's saintly patience. We moved on. Victoria dragged me toward a group of men discussing market trends. Among them was Mr. Henderson, a banker who I knew for a fact had denied Victoria's loan application 2 weeks ago. He looked uncomfortable as we approached. "Gentlemen," Victoria announced, interrupting their conversation, "I want you to meet my daughter-in-law, Sarah." The men nodded politely, but their eyes glazed over. I was of no value to them. I had no status, no power, and no money. "Sarah was just telling me how difficult the job market is right now," Victoria lied smoothly. "She has been applying for entry-level positions, cleaning staff, retail, anything really. But with the baby coming, well, nobody wants to hire a liability." She turned to me, her eyes gleaming with malice. "Isn't that right, Sarah? Tell Mr. Henderson how hard it is to find someone willing to take a chance on you." I looked at Mr. Henderson. I knew his bank's quarterly earnings were down. I knew his position was precarious. I also knew that my holding company was currently negotiating a buyout of his bank's mortgage division. If he knew who I was, he would be on his knees begging for a meeting. It is very difficult, I said softly, keeping my eyes on the floor. People often judge by appearances rather than ability. Victoria let out a sharp laugh. Well, to be fair, dear, ability has to be proven. And you have never really held a real job, have you? Liam was just too soft with you. He let you play house while the adults did the work. She squeezed my arm tighter, leaning in to whisper in my ear. Smile, Sarah. You look miserable. I am doing you a favor. These people might have a maid position opening up if you look desperate enough. We continued the tour. Round and round the room we went. With every introduction, Victoria added another layer to the lie. To one group, I was a recovering alcoholic, which was a complete fabrication. To another, I was a reckless spender who had drained Liam's savings, which was ironic, considering she was the one who had drained him dry. I saw Jasmine watching from across the room. She looked ready to intervene, her hand gripping her clutch so hard her knuckles were white. I caught her eye and gave a barely perceptible shake of my head. Not yet. The trap was not fully sprung. By the time we reached the catering station near the kitchen doors, I felt physically exhausted from the weight of her cruelty. But mentally, I was razor sharp. Every insult she threw at me was fuel. Every time she called me useless, I mentally added another zero to the buyout price of her favorite art collection. We stopped next to a young waiter who was struggling with a heavy silver tray loaded with crystal champagne flutes. He looked overwhelmed, sweat beading on his forehead. Victoria stopped and looked at the waiter, then at me. A slow, cruel smile spread across her face. An idea had just occurred to her, a way to degrade me completely before the big investor arrived. You know, she said loudly, drawing the attention of the nearby guests. I think we are going about this all wrong. Handouts are not the answer, are they, Sarah? They just make people lazy. My father always said that dignity comes from labor. She reached out and took the heavy silver tray from the startled waiter. The champagne glasses clinked together dangerously. She turned to me and thrust the tray into my hands. Here, she said, make yourself useful. If you want to eat at my table tonight, you should earn it. Go around and serve the guests. Show them that you are willing to work for your supper. The tray was heavy. My pregnant belly made it awkward to hold, and my center of gravity was off. I staggered slightly under the weight, and a few drops of champagne spilled onto the cuff of my faded dress. A few guests gasped. Some chuckled. Mrs. Higgins whispered something to her friend, and they both giggled behind their hands. Victoria crossed her arms, looking at me with triumph. Well, go on. Do not just stand there. Mr. Henderson looks like he needs a refill. And try not to drop anything. Those glasses are Waterford crystal. They are worth more than your life savings. I looked at the tray. Then I looked at Victoria. This was the bottom. This was the moment she wanted to break me. She wanted me to cry. She wanted me to throw the tray down and storm out so she could play the victim again. She wanted to tell everyone, see, I tried to help her, but she is just too proud and ungrateful. I took a deep breath. I adjusted my grip on the silver handles. I straightened my spine just enough to be noticeable to anyone paying attention, but not enough to break character. Of course, Victoria, I said, my voice steady. I would be happy to help. I turned away from her and began to walk toward the guests. I approached Mr. Henderson first. Champagne, sir? I asked, offering the tray. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and discomfort. He took a glass, muttering a quiet thank you, without meeting my eyes. I moved through the crowd. I became invisible and hypervisible at the same time. I was the entertainment, the tragic widow forced to serve the elite. As I walked, I let my internal monologue run free. It was the only thing keeping me from laughing out loud. Drink up, Mr. Henderson, I thought, as he sipped the expensive vintage. Enjoy it. Because tomorrow morning, my auditors are going to be in your office asking about those hidden liabilities in your portfolio. You think you are looking at a waitress, but you are looking at your new boss. I moved to Mrs. Higgins. She took a glass with a sneer. Poor thing, she said to me as if I were a child. Maybe if you do a good job, Victoria will give you a reference. My housekeeper is looking for an assistant. I smiled at her. A cold, polite smile. That is very kind of you, Mrs. Higgins, I thought. But I don't think I will have time. I will be too busy converting your husband's golf course into a public park once the zoning permits I applied for go through next month. I circled back toward the center of the room where Victoria was holding court again, basking in the admiration of her friends. She watched me work with a satisfied smirk. She thought she had won. She thought she had put me in my place. She did not know that the champagne I was serving was paid for by a credit line that was now owned by Aurora Trust. She did not know that the catering company was a subsidiary of a hospitality group I had acquired last year. She did not know that the very dress I was wearing was not a symbol of poverty, but a costume for the executioner. My lower back began to ache, but I pushed through it. I needed this image to be burned into everyone's mind. I needed them to remember Sarah the servant, Sarah the beggar, Sarah the girl who was not good enough, because in less than an hour when the truth came out, the contrast would be lethal. I approached Victoria with the tray. There was one glass left. "Champagne, Victoria?" I asked. She looked at me and laughed, taking the glass. "See," she told the group around her. "She is learning. A little hard work never killed anyone. Maybe there is hope for her yet." She took a sip, looking at me over the rim of the glass. "You can go back to the kitchen now, Sarah. Refill the tray, and tell the chef to hurry up with the appetizers. The investor will be here any minute, and I want everything perfect." I nodded. "Yes, Victoria." I turned and walked toward the kitchen doors, but I did not feel humiliated. I felt powerful. I felt an eerie calm settling over me like a suit of armor. "Laugh while you can, Victoria," I thought, as the kitchen doors swung shut behind me, cutting off the noise of the party. "You just ordered the owner of the building to fetch you snacks. You have no idea that the investor you are waiting for is already in the building. And she is not here to save you. She is here to foreclose." I set the tray down on the stainless steel counter. The kitchen staff looked at me confused. "Can we get you something, ma'am?" the head chef asked. He didn't know who I was, but he knew I wasn't a waiter. I looked at him and smiled. A real smile this time. "No, thank you," I said. "Just wait. The show is about to start." I checked my watch. 5 minutes until Marcus arrived. 5 minutes until the name Sarah Vance stopped being a punchline and started being a sentence. I adjusted my dress, smoothed my hair, and waited. The appetizer was done. It was time for the main course. The crystal chandelier above the ballroom seemed to vibrate with the tension in the room. It was finally time. Victoria signaled the tech crew she had hired for the evening, and the ambient lighting dimmed, leaving only a bright, focused spotlight shining on the podium at the center of the stage. She adjusted the microphone stand, her diamond rings catching the light and sending fractures of artificial brilliance across the room. She looked out at the sea of guests with a look of triumphant hunger. She believed she had pulled it off. She believed that in the next few minutes she would secure the $10 million injection that would scrub away her debts and secure her position as the queen of local society. I stood in the shadows near the service entrance, my hands still gripping the heavy silver tray. My back ached from the weight, and my feet were swollen in the cheap shoes I had worn to complete my costume of poverty. But my mind was electric. I watched her preen. I watched her gloat. I savored this moment because I knew it was the last time Victoria Vance would ever stand on a stage with dignity. Victoria tapped the microphone. The sound echoed through the silent room, demanding attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice trembling with theatrical emotion, "thank you all for coming tonight. As many of you know, the Vance family has weathered a difficult storm recently. The loss of my beloved son Liam was a blow that would have destroyed a lesser family." She paused to dab a fake tear from her eye. The audience murmured sympathetically. I felt a surge of cold rage in my chest. She was using Liam's name, using his memory to sell a fraudulent narrative of resilience. She hadn't shed a single real tear for him. She had only cried for the credit cards he left behind. But she continued, her voice rising with strength. "We are Vances, and Vances do not crumble. We rebuild. We expand. And tonight I am thrilled to announce that our legacy has attracted the attention of a partner who understands the value of tradition, a partner who sees the brilliance of our future." She swept her arm toward the double doors at the far end of the room. The music swelled, a dramatic orchestral piece she had specifically requested. "Tonight, we turn a new page. We secure the future of this estate and this family for generations to come. Please join me in welcoming the savior of the Vance legacy, the representative from Aurora Trust, who is here to finalize a $10 million investment in our family." The spotlight swung from Victoria to the double doors. The room held its breath. Every neck craned. Every eye widened. This was the moment they had all been whispering about. The mystery investor, the white knight. The heavy doors swung open. For a moment, there was nothing but the empty frame. Then a figure stepped into the light. It was Marcus. He looked impeccable. He was wearing a bespoke charcoal suit that fit his frame perfectly. He carried a leather portfolio under one arm and walked with the confident stride of a man who knows he holds all the cards. He did not look like a savior. He looked like an executioner dressed for a board meeting. Victoria let out a gasp of delight. She practically ran down the steps of the stage, her velvet dress trailing behind her. She rushed toward Marcus, her arms outstretched, ready to embrace him as if he were a long-lost son. "Welcome," she gushed, reaching him in the center of the room. "Oh, welcome to our home. We are so honored. I cannot tell you how much this means to us." She reached out to shake his hand, beaming at the crowd. "Everyone, this is the visionary from Aurora Trust," she announced. Marcus stopped. He did not raise his hand to meet hers. He did not smile. He stood perfectly still, his expression unreadable, cold, and professional. He looked at Victoria's outstretched hand as if it were a dead fish. Then he took a single deliberate step back, creating a chasm of distance between them. Mrs. Vance, Marcus said, his voice projecting clearly in the silent room. "You seem to be under a misunderstanding." Victoria's smile faltered. Her hand dropped to her side. "What do you mean? You are the representative, are you not?" "We spoke on the phone. I am the executive assistant," Marcus replied. His tone was flat, devoid of any warmth. "I am here to facilitate the paperwork and ensure the security of the asset. But I am not the decision maker, and I am certainly not the investor." A ripple of confusion went through the room. Guests exchanged glances. If this sharp-dressed man wasn't the investor, then who was? Victoria laughed nervously, a high-pitched sound that cracked in the middle. "Oh, I see. Well then, where is your boss? Is he parking the car? Is he on his way?" Marcus looked at her with a mixture of pity and disdain. He adjusted his cufflinks slowly. "The chairman does not park cars, Mrs. Vance, and the chairman is not on the way. The chairman has been in this room for the last 2 hours." The silence that followed was absolute. It was a heavy, suffocating silence. Victoria froze. Her eyes darted around the room, scanning the faces of the guests. She looked at the senator. She looked at Mr. Henderson. She looked at the wealthy business owners. She was looking for a man in a suit. She was looking for someone who looked like power, who she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I do not understand. There is no one else here. I know everyone in this room." Marcus did not answer. He simply turned his head and looked directly at me. All eyes followed his gaze. They looked past the ice sculpture. They looked past the buffet table. They looked into the shadows near the kitchen door, where the pregnant widow in the dirty apron was standing. For a few seconds, nobody understood. They saw me, and their eyes slid right off, assuming Marcus must be looking at someone behind me. They could not compute the data. It was impossible. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of their confusion. It was sweeter than the expensive wine they had been drinking. I looked at Victoria. She was staring at me with a look of utter bewilderment. I lifted the heavy silver tray I had been holding. The crystal glasses rattled against each other. Then, with a deliberate, slow movement, I opened my hands. The tray crashed to the floor. The sound was explosive, like a gunshot in a library. Glass shattered, sending shards of Waterford crystal skittering across the marble floor. The noise made half the room jump. Victoria flinched violently. I stepped over the broken glass. My expression was set in stone. I reached behind my back and untied the knot of the stained, oversized apron I had been wearing. It was a hideous thing, a garment Victoria had forced on me to hide my pregnancy and my dignity. I pulled the loop. The apron fell away. It slid down my body, pooling at my feet like a shed skin. Underneath, I was not wearing the faded floral rags they had seen earlier. That had been a layer of theater, a costume I had worn over my true armor. As the apron fell, it revealed the dress I had been wearing underneath all along. It was a custom Givenchy maternity gown, midnight blue silk, that shimmered like the night sky. It was tailored to perfection, hugging my form and turning my pregnancy into a statement of regal power. On my wrist, I snapped on the diamond cuff I had hidden in my pocket, a piece of jewelry that was worth more than the mortgage on this entire estate. I reached up and pulled the pins from my messy bun. My hair cascaded down my shoulders in soft waves. I was no longer Sarah the charity case. I was Sarah Vance, the billionaire. A collective gasp went through the room. It was a sound of pure shock. Mrs. Higgins dropped her purse. Mr. Henderson's mouth hung open. I began to walk. I did not walk with the shuffled head, down posture of the broken widow. I walked with the stride of a CEO entering a hostile boardroom. My heels clicked on the marble, a steady rhythmic countdown to Victoria's destruction. The crowd parted for me. They scrambled to get out of my way, knocking into chairs and tables in their haste. They looked at me with fear. They saw the coldness in my eyes, and they realized with terrifying clarity that they had spent the last 2 hours mocking the woman who owned their debts. I walked past Mr. Henderson. He tried to stammer an apology, but I didn't even blink. He was a ghost to me. I walked past the circle of women who had pitied me. They shrank back, clutching their pearls, their faces pale. I walked straight toward the stage. Victoria stood frozen at the bottom of the steps. Her brain was finally catching up to reality, but her ego refused to accept it. She watched me approach, her eyes bulging. "Sarah," she hissed when I was a few feet away. Her voice was a mix of panic and fury. "What are you doing? What is this stunt? Where did you get that dress?" I did not stop. I walked right up to her. "Victoria," I said, my voice calm and deadly, "you have something that belongs to me." I walked past her and ascended the stairs to the stage. Victoria snapped out of her trance. She scrambled up the stairs after me, grabbing at my arm. "No," she shrieked. "You cannot go up there. Get down. You are embarrassing me. Get down immediately, you ungrateful little brat." She tried to block my path to the microphone. She was panting, her face twisted into an ugly mask of desperation. "Security," she screamed at the empty room. "Remove her! Someone remove her!" But the security guards did not move. They worked for the agency I had acquired 3 months ago. They stood by the doors, their arms crossed, watching their employer take the stage. I stopped and looked at Victoria. She was trembling. She looked small. She looked like a child trying to stop a tidal wave with a paper shield. "I am not the one who should be embarrassed, Victoria," I said softly, only for her to hear. I reached out and took the microphone from her hand. She held on to it for a second, a pathetic game of tug-of-war, but I simply stared her down until her fingers went slack. I stepped up to the podium. The spotlight hit me blinding and warm. I looked out at the room, at the faces of the people who had judged me, at the opulent decorations paid for with my money, at the crumbling dynasty of the Vance family. I tapped the microphone once. The sound boomed through the speakers, silencing the last murmurs of the crowd. I looked down at Victoria, who was standing just off to the side, looking like she was about to vomit. Then I looked directly into the camera of the live stream that was broadcasting this event to the local business community. I leaned into the mic. "Are you looking for me, Victoria?" I asked, my voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "You introduced the representative of Aurora Trust. You asked for the person who holds the $10 million debt on this estate. You asked for the chairman." I paused, letting the weight of the words sink in. "Well, here I am." Victoria let out a strangled sob. "No," she whispered. "It is not true. It cannot be true." I ignored her. I turned back to the crowd. "My name is Sarah Vance. I am the founder and majority shareholder of Aurora Medical Systems and the Aurora Trust." I reached into my silk clutch and pulled out a stack of documents. I held them up in the spotlight. "And these," I said, my voice hardening, "are the foreclosure papers for the property we are standing in." The room erupted. Victoria looked at the papers in my hand, her eyes darting back and forth as if she were trying to read a foreign language. Her face was a mask of contorted rage and disbelief. She lunged forward, trying to snatch the documents from my grip, but I took a smooth step back, my movements fluid and controlled. She grasped at empty air, stumbling in her high heels. "You are a liar!" she shrieked, her voice cracking and echoing through the silent ballroom. "These are fake. You printed these on your little inkjet printer at home. You are insane, Sarah. You need to be institutionalized." She turned to the crowd, her arms waving frantically. "Do not listen to her. She is having a psychotic break. The grief has destroyed her mind. She thinks she is a CEO. She is nothing but a delusional housewife. Security! Where is the security? I want this woman thrown out and arrested for forgery." I watched her unravel. It was fascinating in a morbid way, like watching a building collapse in slow motion. She was fighting reality with every ounce of her being because the alternative was too terrifying for her to accept. I signaled to Marcus, who was standing near the audio-visual controls. He nodded once. "Let us look at the facts, Victoria," I said, my voice amplified by the microphone, cutting through her screams. "You have spent the last 3 years telling anyone who would listen that I was a gold digger. You told your friends, your country club associates, and even my own husband that I was a leech draining the Vance family fortune." Victoria stopped screaming. She was panting, staring at me with hatred. "Because you are," she spat. "My son worked himself to death to support you. He paid for your clothes, your food, your very existence. And this is how you repay him, by embarrassing his mother at her own gala." I smiled. It was a cold smile that did not reach my eyes. "You are right, Victoria." The room went deadly quiet. Even Victoria looked surprised by my admission. "You are right about one thing," I continued. "Liam did not leave me any money. When the will was read and the accounts were checked, they were empty. There was no life insurance payout for me. There was no secret savings account." Victoria let out a triumphant ha. "See, I told you. He knew what you were. He cut you off." I shook my head slowly. "No, Victoria. He did not leave me money because he never had any money of his own to leave." I pointed the remote control at the massive projection screen behind me. The screen, which was supposed to display Victoria's presentation for the investor, flickered to life. But instead of photos of the estate or charts showing social impact, the screen displayed high-definition digital scans of bank documents. Because the entire time we were married, I said, my voice steady and hard, "The money Liam spent, the money he gave you every month to cover your gambling debts, the money he used to pay for the new roof on this house, it was all his salary." The screen changed. It showed a series of monthly wire transfers. Each one was for $50,000. The numbers were staggering. The crowd gasped. "And that salary," I continued, walking closer to the edge of the stage, "was paid to him by his employer." I pressed the button again. The image zoomed in on the bottom of the checks. The signature line was blown up to the size of a billboard. It was my signature, bold, clear, undeniable. And underneath the signature were the printed words, "Sarah Vance, CEO, Aurora Medical and Holdings." The text on the screen detailed Liam's position, Director of Philanthropic Outreach, a position created by the CEO. I watched the realization hit Victoria like a physical blow. Her knees buckled and she had to grab the podium to stay upright. She stared at the screen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "Liam was my employee, Victoria," I said, my voice dropping to a lower, more intimate register that the microphone caught perfectly. "I hired him because he had a good heart, and I wanted him to feel useful. I paid him a salary that was 10 times the market rate because I loved him, and I wanted him to be able to take care of his mother." I took a step closer to her. "Every designer dress you are wearing right now, that necklace, the champagne you just drank, it was all paid for by me. You have been living on my charity for 3 years and you didn't even know it. You called me a parasite while you were the one feeding off my blood." Victoria shook her head violently, tears of humiliation finally streaming down her face. No, it is a trick. Liam was a businessman. He had his own investments. His investments were in my companies," I countered. "And when he died, those shares reverted to the primary holder, me." I turned away from her, dismissing her presence, and addressed the stunned audience. "You all came here tonight expecting to meet an investor. You came to see if the Vance family could be saved." I gestured to the grand hall around us. Victoria was looking for someone to buy her debt. She was looking for a savior to write a check and make her problems go away. I paused, looking directly at Mr. Henderson, the banker. Well, she got her wish. The debt has been bought. I signaled Marcus again. The screen changed one last time. This time it showed a legal document, a deed of trust, a transfer of mortgage, and a foreclosure notice. I bought your debt. Victoria, I said, my voice ringing with finality. I bought the banknotes this morning, I bought the outstanding loans this afternoon, and I bought the mortgage on this estate 1 hour ago. I held up the physical papers in my hand. You were right when you told me to leave this house in the rain. You said this house belongs to the Vance family. You were absolutely correct. I slapped the papers down onto the podium with a loud crack. It belongs to me, Sarah Vance. Victoria let out a wail. You cannot do this. This is my home. I have lived here for 30 years. You cannot just buy my life. I looked at her with zero sympathy. I can, and I did. You told me that business is business, Victoria. You told me that feelings don't pay the bills. Well, I am treating this strictly as a business transaction. I leaned into the microphone for the final strike. The room was so silent you could hear a pin drop. As the new owner of this property, I have reviewed the tenant list, and I have decided that the current occupant is a liability. You have damaged the property value with your negligence, and your reputation is a risk to my brand. I looked at my watch. It was a diamond-encrusted Patek Philippe that I had refused to wear when I was playing the role of the poor wife. It is currently 9:15 p.m., I said. With the authority of the foreclosure executed this evening, I am issuing a formal eviction notice. I looked Victoria dead in the eye. You have 24 hours to remove your personal effects and vacate my property. If you are not off the premises by this time tomorrow, I will have the sheriff remove you for trespassing. Victoria collapsed. She slid down the side of the podium, sobbing into her velvet skirt. The crowd stared in horror and awe. They weren't looking at a widow anymore. They were looking at a titan. And as for the rest of you, I said, looking out at the guests, this party is over. Please leave my house. I turned and walked away from the podium, leaving Victoria crying in the spotlight of her own failure. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The sound of her sobbing was the only applause I needed. The silence that followed my declaration was absolute and heavy. It hung over the room like a thick fog, suffocating the laughter and the music that had filled the space only moments before. I watched the transformation of the crowd with a detached scientific interest. These were the same people who had sneered at my faded dress and my pregnant belly just 10 minutes ago. Now they looked at me as if I were a mythical creature that had just breathed fire. Their faces were pale, drained of blood and arrogance. Mr. Henderson, the banker who had refused to look me in the eye when I served him champagne, was now trembling. He set his glass down on a nearby table, his hand shaking so badly that the crystal chimed against the wood. He knew better than anyone what it meant to have Aurora Trust as an enemy. He was mentally calculating his own exposure, wondering if I owned his debts too. Mrs. Higgins and her circle of socialites were staring at their shoes, unable to meet my gaze. They shrank back physically, trying to make themselves small, trying to disappear into the woodwork. They had realized too late that the woman they had treated as a servant was actually the queen of the board. I saw the shift in their eyes. It wasn't just fear, it was respect. The cold, hard respect that money commands in their world. I wasn't Sarah the widow anymore. I was Sarah the shark. And they were all terrifyingly aware that they were swimming in my ocean. But Victoria was not looking at the floor. She was looking at her life crumbling into dust. The reality of the foreclosure notice on the podium had finally pierced through her delusion. The color had vanished from her face, leaving her looking gray and aged under the harsh spotlight. Her hands, which had been so steady when she was holding court, were now clawing at the air as if she were drowning. She looked at the guests, seeing their retreat. She saw her allies abandoning her. She realized she was alone on that stage, exposed and vulnerable. Panic, true primal panic, took over. "Sarah," she gasped, stumbling toward me. Her voice was no longer commanding. It was a high-pitched wheeze. "Sarah, wait. You cannot be serious." She reached out and grabbed my hand, her fingers digging into my skin with a desperate strength. Her palms were clammy. "Sarah, darling," she said, forcing a smile that looked like a rictus of pain. "Everyone listen. Sarah is just having a little fun with us. It is a joke, a very elaborate joke. Isn't it, Sarah?" She squeezed my hand, trying to signal me to play along, trying to force me back into the script she had written. "We are family," she pleaded, her eyes wide and wet. "We are Vances. We do not do this to each other. We love each other. I took you in, Sarah. I gave you a home when you had nothing. You are the mother of my grandchild, my flesh and blood. You wouldn't throw your own family out on the street. Not you. You are too sweet, too kind. I looked down at her hand gripping mine. I felt nothing. No pity, no anger, just a cold repulsion. I slowly peeled her fingers off my hand one by one. I did it gently but firmly, like removing a burr from a piece of fine silk. I was sweet, Victoria, I said, my voice low enough that only she in the front row could hear. I was kind. But you burned that girl alive the night you threw her out into the rain. The woman standing before you is not sweet. She is solvent. Victoria stepped back as if I had struck her. She looked around wildly, searching for a lifeline. Her eyes landed on Jasmine. Jasmine, she cried out, relief flooding her voice. Jasmine, thank God. Do something. You are a lawyer. Tell her she cannot do this. Tell her this is illegal. Victoria rushed toward the edge of the stage, gesturing frantically to her daughter-in-law. Jasmine, get up here. Fix this. Tell these people that the deed is fake. Tell them that Sarah is lying. You know the law. You know our rights. Defend this family. The room turned to look at Jasmine. My sister-in-law sat calmly at her table. She had not moved during the entire spectacle. She had simply watched, sipping her water, her face an impassive mask. Slowly, gracefully, Jasmine stood up. She smoothed the skirt of her dress. She picked up a thick manila folder that had been resting on the table next to her clutch. She walked toward the stage. Her steps were measured and confident. She did not look at the guests. She looked only at Victoria. Victoria let out a sob of relief. Yes, yes, tell her, Jasmine. Sue her. We will sue her for everything she has. Jasmine stopped at the bottom of the stairs. She looked up at Victoria, then she looked at me. For a brief moment, our eyes met. There was a spark of shared understanding, a silent acknowledgement of the alliance we had built in the shadows. Jasmine walked up the stairs. She stood next to Victoria, but she did not turn to face me. She turned to face her mother-in-law. I cannot sue her. Victoria, Jasmine said, her voice clear and professional, because I do not represent you. Victoria blinked, confused. What? What are you talking about? You are family. You are Connor's wife. Jasmine opened the folder. She pulled out a document stamped with the official seal of the state court. I am a lawyer, Victoria, Jasmine said coldly, and a lawyer chooses her clients based on their integrity and their ability to pay. You have neither. She thrust the document toward Victoria. I represent Sarah Vance, Jasmine announced. I have been retained as her personal counsel for the past week, and I have been instructed to serve you with this. Victoria looked at the paper. Her hands shook so hard she could barely hold it. What is this? She whispered. It is a writ of attachment, Jasmine explained, using her courtroom voice sharp and precise. It is an order to seize personal assets to satisfy the outstanding judgment on the commercial loans you defaulted on. Jasmine pointed to the diamond necklace around Victoria's neck. That necklace is now the property of Aurora Trust. She pointed to the bracelet on Victoria's wrist. That bracelet is now the property of Aurora Trust. She pointed to the fur coat draped over Victoria's chair. And the contents of your walk-in closet, your art collection, and your vintage car are all now the property of my client. Victoria made a sound like a wounded animal. No, you cannot take my things. Those are personal. Those are mine. They were collateral, Jasmine corrected her. You used them to secure the loans you took out to pay for this party. You gambled, Victoria, and you lost. Jasmine turned to me and handed me the rest of the file. Madam Chairman, Jasmine said, addressing me with formal respect. The inventory is complete. The sheriff is on standby to oversee the transfer of assets tomorrow morning. I have also prepared the restraining order barring Mrs. Victoria Vance from coming within 500 feet of you or the company headquarters. Thank you, Jasmine, I said, taking the file. Excellent work. The betrayal was the final blow. Victoria looked from Jasmine to me, her mind unable to comprehend that the two women she had marginalized, the black daughter-in-law she had called second-rate, and the poor widow she had called a leech, were now standing together holding the keys to her entire existence. You plotted this, Victoria whispered, her voice trembling with horror. You two worked together, behind my back. We didn't plot. Victoria. Jasmine said, closing her briefcase with a snap. "We simply conducted business. Sarah made a tender offer for your debt. I facilitated the legal transfer. It was all completely above board, unlike the way you have run this family's finances for the last decade." Jasmine stepped back, moving to stand beside me. We stood shoulder to shoulder, the united front of the new order. The crowd watched in stunned silence. They saw the shift in power physically manifested on that stage. The old matriarch was broken, standing alone and weeping. And standing above her were the new queens of the empire, young, diverse, and utterly unstoppable. Victoria looked at the crowd one last time, pleading for sympathy with her eyes. But no one moved. No one spoke. They knew that to side with her now was social and financial suicide. I looked at the guests. "I believe I asked you to leave," I said, my voice cutting through the silence. Immediately, the room burst into motion. It was a stampede. People grabbed their coats and rushed for the exits, desperate to escape the blast zone. They didn't say goodbye to Victoria. They didn't look back. They just ran, leaving the woman who had once ruled their social calendar standing in the wreckage of her own hubris. As the last guest fled into the night, leaving the front door swinging in the wind, I looked at Victoria. She was slumped against the podium, clutching the foreclosure notice to her chest like a shield. She looked up at me, tears streaking her heavy makeup. "Sarah," she whimpered. "Where will I go?" I looked at Jasmine. Jasmine looked at me. We didn't smile. We simply turned and walked off the stage, leaving Victoria alone in the spotlight of an empty room. "I hear the Motel 6 on the highway has vacancies," I said over my shoulder, "but I would hurry. Check-in closes at midnight. And Victoria," I paused at the door, "they don't take American Express, especially not maxed-out ones. 6 months have passed since that night at the estate, and the silence that surrounds me now is not the silence of loneliness, but the silence of absolute peace. I am sitting in the presidential suite of the Aurora Medical Center, the hospital where my name is etched into the cornerstone of the building. The morning sun is streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the face of my newborn son Leo, who is sleeping soundly in my arms. He has his father's nose and my eyes. He is the heir to an empire that spans real estate, healthcare, and technology. But right now, he is just a baby, safe and warm in a room that costs more per night than most people earn in a year. The door to the suite opened softly, and Jasmine walked in, followed closely by Connor. They looked different than they did 6 months ago. The weight of Victoria's oppression had been lifted from their shoulders. Jasmine was no longer just the ignored daughter-in-law. She was now my chief legal officer, running the entire compliance division of my holding company. She wore her power well-dressed in a sharp, tailored suit that commanded respect. Connor looked healthier too. I had put him in charge of the estate management division, giving him a purpose he never had under his mother's shadow. They walked over to the bed, their voices hushed in reverence for the sleeping baby. Jasmine reached out and touched Leo's tiny hand, her eyes filling with tears. "He is perfect, Sarah," she whispered. "Liam would have been so proud. He would have," I agreed, looking down at my son. "He would have been proud that his son was born in safety, not in the poverty his mother tried to force upon us." Connor sat in the chair next to the bed, looking out at the city skyline. "You know the renovations on the old house are almost finished," he said. "We turned the ballroom where she held that awful party into a community center for the neighborhood. It feels good to see children playing in a room that used to be so cold and forbidden." I smiled. The estate was still in the family, but it was no longer a monument to Victoria's vanity. I had transferred the deed to a trust managed by Connor and Jasmine, allowing them to live in the main house while using the grounds for charitable events. It was the legacy Liam had actually wanted. "And what about the former tenant?" I asked, keeping my voice even. Jasmine exchanged a look with Connor, a look that was half amused and half pitying. She pulled a tablet from her bag and tapped the screen. "She is still at the apartment on 42nd Street, Jasmine reported. "It is a 4th-floor walk-up with no elevator. The landlord is strict about noise and late rent. She missed a payment last week and had to sell her last fur coat to cover it." I nodded, feeling a sense of detached satisfaction. "And her employment status?" "She is still working at the Lotus Spa," Connor said, trying to suppress a grin. "It is hard work. She is on her feet for 8 hours a day, answering phones, folding towels, and serving herbal tea to the clients." The manager tells me she complains constantly, but she is too terrified of being fired to actually quit. She needs the health insurance. I looked out the window. The Lotus Spa was a mid-range establishment downtown. It was clean and respectable, but it was a service job. It required humility. It required bowing to customers and swallowing your pride. It was exactly the kind of work Victoria had mocked me for supposedly doing. Does she know I asked? Jasmine shook her head. No, she has no idea. She thinks the Lotus Spa is owned by a frantic woman named Mrs. Yang. She does not know that Mrs. Yang reports to a regional manager, who reports to a director, who reports to the board of Aurora Lifestyle Group, which is owned by you. I leaned back against the silk pillows. That was the beauty of the arrangement. I could have fired her. I could have blacklisted her from every job in the city, ensuring she starved. But that would have been too easy. Instead, I gave her a job. I became her employer. Every paycheck she cashed, every dollar she used to buy groceries came from me. I was supporting her just like I always had, but now she had to work for it. She was serving tea to women she used to look down on, wearing a uniform she despised, unaware that the hand feeding her was the same hand she had tried to bite. She is learning the value of labor, I said, softly repeating the words she had said to me that night at the party. It is good for her character. Connor laughed. You are terrifying, Sarah. Remind me never to cross you. I am not terrifying Connor, I said, shifting Leo in my arms. I am just thorough. She wanted to be part of high society. Now she is serving it. I think it is a very poetic ending. They stayed for another hour talking about the future, about the new wing of the hospital we were opening, and about Leo's trust fund. When they left, the room felt large and quiet again. I stood up and walked to the window carrying my son. Below me, the city of New York sprawled out like a living map. Somewhere down there in the grid of streets, Victoria was clocking in for her shift, straightening magazines in a waiting room, forcing a smile for a customer who didn't care who she used to be. She was living the life she had tried to sentence me to. She was a nobody. I looked at my reflection in the glass. I didn't see the scared pregnant widow anymore. I saw a mother. I saw a protector. I saw a survivor who had turned her grief into armor and her pain into power. I kissed Leo's forehead. We are safe now, little one, I whispered. No one will ever make you feel small. No one will ever tell you that you don't belong, because we built this world, and we decide who gets a seat at the table. I turned away from the window and walked back into the warmth of the room, ready to begin the rest of my life. The war was over, and for the first time in a long time, the silence was not heavy. It was golden. The sweetest revenge is not making them scream. It is making them irrelevant. It is building a life so magnificent that their existence becomes nothing more than a footnote in your biography. Victoria wanted me to be a servant, so I became a queen. She wanted to erase me, so I bought the pen she was writing with. If this story of absolute vindication had you cheering out loud, smash that like button right now. My favorite part was when I took off the apron to reveal the Givenchy gown underneath, proving that dignity is not about what you wear, but who you are. But I am curious about you. What was your favorite moment? Was it when I crashed the party with the champagne tray? Or was it when Jasmine handed her the foreclosure notice in front of her friends? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Do not miss more incredible revenge stories like this one. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.